Oh shit, it's me, Jake, from Millways Productions. I'm back and I got another update for you guys on my game, Cut to the Chase, and I want to show you some of the progress I've made on it since my last video, and show you how it looks, and all of the things I plan on improving on it with the time that I have left. So here is the progress that I've made in the last month or so. The first thing I want to talk about is the game's art, since for me it has been the biggest barrier to entry, because, to put it lightly, I am incredibly artistically challenged. But for the past few months or so, I've been dabbling in things like pixel art and going through this book on video game art, and have been steadily making my way through it, and I feel as if I have definitely improved on it since I started, which I think translated into the pixel art I have created for the games, because pixel art kind of forces you to pare down what you want to include in the shapes and the forms of the things you want to draw. And I think that comes across clearly with stuff like the player and the enemy design, and simple animation that goes along with those two, and the tile maps and all of the other stuff that I've done for the ground environment, and even for the objects that I've inserted into the game, like the cars, the pedestrians, which are represented by the umbrellas, which I thought was a good way of kind of drawing them, because it's supposed to take place during a rainy spell. And for the umbrellas, I designed this simple code that makes the crowd look different each time, with each instance of the game kind of generating random colors throughout the crowd and giving each umbrella a different look. And I think that does a good job of not only making the levels look less samey, it also makes the levels look fuller, just having the pedestrians in the game. I also made some buildings to populate these levels as well, and a handful of street decorations, a handful of visual blockers, which I hope to incorporate into the game a bit more fully. Speaking of which, the gameplay is as I outlined in the previous video. It's a simple catch cat and mouse game where you try to catch the enemy, the perpetrator, and the ability for the player to catch the enemy and the enemy to get away is still reasonably fair, and I think the enemy still is elusive, but it is still entirely fair to beat the game from most of the level. What makes it fair and what makes the player have a bit of a challenge is the obstacles that I've added, and I think I've mentioned one of them so far, which is the pedestrians and like the fire hydrants, like the physical objects. I did that to help change things up from level to level and add some different level design. And mainly, I think for the first few levels, it is the pedestrians who are, for the most part, static, but in some of the later levels, they become dynamic and they continually block the player's path. And on top of that, there's also the cars, which also block the player's path, but they can potentially end your game, which I think makes that one particular level that they're in more difficult and adds a different challenge to that level. One of the last obstacles that I'm working on is something that's still in development. Obviously, this whole game is still in development, but the one that I'm still working on actively as of right now in terms of implementing is the idea of visual blockers to kind of create some misdirection for the player and make it a bit of a challenge and a bit of a trial and error for the player, and I think it'll add a bit more depth to the last few levels and make it serve ultimately as a bigger challenge in those levels. Or so I hope. I've already set up a few visual blockers, making things that belong on the sides of buildings like flower boxes, fire escapes, and verandas, and it makes it a little bit harder for you to follow the enemy while also still populating the level, which I think is kind of something that I'm learning to do a bit better, populating the level to make it look like it's a lived-in city. Another thing I want to do with the misdirection with those last few levels and to make it more difficult is add in the concept of multiple endings, but that is entirely a work in progress, so only time will tell if this whole idea of visual blocking will even pan out. So, how much time will that time tell? So, my original idea was to have this whole video game done by the 11th of March, because my original deadline was 2 months from my first devlog, which came out on January 11th, but I feel like I can get the game done a little bit earlier than that. I don't want to jinx myself, but that would be my ideal. My ideal date is March 8th. So my plan is to drop a small video saying, hey, the game is out, and then include a link to the itch.io page announcing that it is out in the description of that video. So with my March 8th deadline in mind, what changes am I going to make, and how am I going to finish the game itself? Mainly, I'd like to finish up the last few levels, like I mentioned before, and tie everything together by building on the concept of visual blocking and all around just tightening the gameplay. Doing all the quality of life stuff, like adding more variety to the cars, adding some stuff to make the levels feel a bit better, feel a bit more lived in, more realistic, like with a car level. I want to make the cars kind of feel less synchronized. And I also want to adjust the speed of the game itself, maybe mess around with it, make it feel a bit better even. Overall, I think the game is near completion, and I can't wait to share it with you guys and get feedback from you. So I hope you guys liked this little update and liked this video. And so I hope you click that like button. And if you have any questions, leave a comment in the comment section below, and I will answer it the best I can. And with that being said, I will see you guys when I get this game done, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.